importance of hedonic beliefs, and also in this case it's more an emotional than a rational process. So, as a conclusion, the overall conclusion of this part is that culture influences the desire for personalization that consumers want, and companies should try to highlight product benefits instead of quality characteristics. So, the overall conclusions from chapter 5, 6, and 7 is that there's a positive bidirectional influence between consumer satisfaction and happiness. There's the existence of emotional determinants of CS, as I previously showed. And using this idea, I found that beliefs mediate this chain from perceived quality to consumer loyalty, where quality basically evokes emotions in consumers. It's not a fully rational process. And also that product personalization evokes emotions in consumers. So the overall conclusions is, first, that I was able to clarify the mechanisms that govern the relationship between market share and consumer satisfaction. Second, I also were able to explain the influence of culture on consumer satisfaction at the individual level using uncertainty avoidance. I was also able to develop consumer satisfaction models that take account of the emotional process. One of the managerial implications overall from the first objective is that the industry competitiveness triggers this virtuous cycle between market share and consumer satisfaction. Second, that as I showed, the relationship between consumers and the industries depends on the type of country. So companies should acknowledge the importance of culture. Finally, I was also able to show that emotions influence consumer satisfaction. Therefore, companies should try to use or create models that use emotional processes. Overall, I was able to integrate, companies should try to integrate emotional, cultural, and market share related variables into comprehensive consumer satisfaction models. What is the future research? What comes in the future? First of all, other researchers should try to check the robustness of these models to verify the conclusions in other contexts, use other measures of competitiveness, and cross-validate these findings. Also, there should be there's a lot of work in the case of model integration. Other researchers should try to integrate mood and culture into the model. Culture, they should try to include other dimensions of culture. For example, there's evidence that power distance influences consumer satisfaction. And finally, the researchers try to use panel data to see whether these paths still hold in the other conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed reading your chapter 5, 6, and 7. I have many points I really want to discuss with you, but the time is limited. So I just start with one or two for this time. And if you have time, possibly you can do that later. And what I found most interesting is you have chosen mobile phone for the object for the studies in chapter 6 and also 7. And the point is, for the mobile phone, we can use mobile phone in various ways. For somebody, mobile phone is purely a business tool. Organizer, communicator, email client, while somebody else may just enjoy showing as a passion. Okay? And also somebody really enjoy the games on the mobile. So we can expect very diverse individual differences, especially in terms of the balance between the emotional and rational information processing for the case of the mobile phone. So how do you think about that kind of existence of the individual differences? And also, I'd like to ask you if your model is well representing that kind of diverse individual differences.
Okay. Thank you for the question. As you point out, it is true. It depends on the type of consumer that you're talking about, whether the consumer is younger or it's older, whether it's a businessman or not. But to solve this, and actually we checked when I was doing calculated the dummy variables for profession, and also I calculated some dummy variables for age, and I found that this kind of dummy variables did not influence the model overall results. So, and at least this overall model, the model itself is trying to explain how does emotions influence consumer satisfaction. And in general, it is shown that it influences, but from individual to individual, there will be some changes. I agree on that. It will be not unique. But at least the data shows that every type of individual, at least at some level, actually the emotional processes are working. So it's, I think it still holds under those types of conditions. Second of all, it was about whether my model holds this kind of ideas. That's the second question. And as I said again, for accounting for this type of differences, I use these dummy variables, and at least I found that did not affect the conclusions, the overall conclusions.
I do not think that the variable profession represents that kind of individual differences. Because, for example, look at the university faculties. Some faculties really enjoy cell phone for joy, while for some people, the cell phone is just a business. So I do not think that profession is a good variable to represent that kind of individual difference. But anyway, it's okay. And the second question is about the chapter 7. When I think about the personalization, the first thing which comes to my mind as an antecedents for the desire for personalization is value system and personal. And do you think that your variables, like individualisms, are representing to some extent, or somewhat related to that kind of individual characteristics?
So you said personality and what the two things?
Value system.
Value?
Value system.
Value system. Okay. I think in the case of culture, of course, culture is acknowledged as the society's personality. So from case to case, you will see some variability in the type of personality of people. But overall, I think in the case of these measures of culture that use individualism and uncertainty avoidance are accounting for these individual characteristics of the consumer. But in order to disentangle this, of course, there's the personality itself of each consumer. There are other variables that should be considered. But at least I think future research can account for this. In this case, the level of individualism is accounting for how unique the consumer feels. And in the case of the uncertainty avoidance is measuring this stress, the level of stress, or how much control they crave. And at least in some way we are accounting for this variability. But of course, this is not personality itself, because it should be other types of measures to measure each consumer's personality.
Yeah, why I asked this question is possibly those variables I told you now is called psychographic variables in the marketing field, possibly. But usually the Hofstede culture dimensions are not clearly considered as a part of the psychographic variables. So I was very curious about how they are related. I mean, your variables and what is called psychographic.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
In your survey, you collected the data from many countries based on industry or products. So you almost analyze the data based on the industry and country, and you presented the many outcomes of your survey. So I want to know, did you get common findings or common outcomes across industry and country?
In the case of which chapter? Chapter 7?